Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in the Gospel of Mark. We're going to continue in chapter 13 now. We're going to look at 13 verses 14 through 23, and we're going to continue to look at prophecy concerning the eschaton. It's going to be a lesson in eschatology again, and it's also going to be a lesson in the exhortation of Christ toward his disciples, exhorting them to take up the activity of Noesis, to take up a spiritual perspective in the way that they perceive life, in the way that they perceive and understand history, to take up spiritual perception. Let's go to block 1 and take a look at the text. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, standing where it does not belong, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to enter the house to take anything out. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that this will not take place in winter, because those will be days of distress, unequaled from the beginning when God created the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But for the sake of the elect, whom he has chosen, he has shortened them. At that time, if anyone says to you, "Look, here is the Messiah," "Look, there he is," do not believe it, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. So be on your guard. I have told you everything ahead of time. Very powerful eschatological message of not only the coming eschaton, but the coming tribulation, as if the elect, in other words, believers, will go through a portion of the tribulation. And I believe that to be true from my study. We did a study in our life group in Revelation, and there it looked like that even the elect did go through the early tribulation, but not the great tribulation at the end. And it seems to point to a division here as well. The days of tribulation will be shortened for the elect, and I think that means at the point of the great tribulation. But it is all eschatological narrative. It's very powerful. Let's see how Ruckman, Edwards, and Hegel look at it. And before we get into the commentary, I want you to go to block 3 because I want you to see something. When we get to the Greek verse we're going to look at, it's going to be verse 14. And there's a line in verse 14 that says, if you look at D there, let the discerning person understand. And it's Christ actually uses the Greek New Testament word Noesis. So, you ask, why are you always bringing up Hegel and teachings on Noesis? Well, Hegel was a philosopher, but Hegel once said that all philosophy is theology. All philosophy is about God. And that's why I have followed Hegel. I really appreciate Hegel, and a lot of people have difficulty with him, but he did say all of philosophy is theology. It's all about God, if it's genuine philosophy. And Hegel's entire system of thought was to articulate the process of Noesis. His entire philosophy was breaking down and articulating the entire process of Noesis, the entire process of spiritual perception. And then you wonder where we get the word. Well, it's a New Testament word, and it is used by Christ in chapter 13, verse 14. Now let's go to the commentary in block 2, Ruckman. Christ is speaking to Jews facing the tribulation. In the Romans in AD 70, when destroying Jerusalem, did offer sacrifices to Jupiter in the Jewish temple. They did desecrate the temple. See 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, and 4. In the end time, one will enter the temple and demand to be worshipped. Again, we're looking at the prefigurement of the destruction of the temple in AD 70. Now, let's look at Edwards, because again we have another desolation. In 168 BC, a Syrian general erected an altar to Zeus in the Jewish temple as a prefigurement of an event that would occur in the future, in a future tribulation. Now here's one that just about everybody knows about. Also in AD 41, Caligula, the very evil emperor, attempted to erect a statue of himself in the Jewish temple to be worshipped as a god. Caligula wanted to be worshipped in his lifetime as a god. There have been many attempts at desecrating the temple. Caligula was one that came in the 1st century, his attempt. But the most likely prefigurement to be mentioned here would be the AD 70 destruction of the temple. That's kind of the context that we're looking at, is the prophecy of Christ as of the AD 70 destruction of the temple by Rome, and it's a prefigurement of coming tribulation and unequaled tribulation. A horrible tribulation is coming in the eschaton, but believers will not go through the great tribulation. Believers will go through a period of tribulation, and then they will be, the tribulation will be cut short for them. They will not go through the great tribulation. But there will be a tribulation unequaled by anything we've ever known. But for Edwards, he says we got to keep in mind the context, the prophecy by Christ of the destruction of the temple, and that would be a cataclysmic event for the Jews, because if the temple is destroyed, that's the center of their religious life. That is the end of the world. That is the end of history to the Jewish people. If you say the temple is going to be destroyed, utterly destroyed, not one stone will be on another, every stone will be thrown down, that would be the end of the world for the mind of the Jewish people. But so Edwards says the most likely prefigurement mentioned here would be the AD 70 destruction of the temple. It would be the destruction of the temple. So I think we have to give Edwards a lot of credibility here, that he's probably right, that is the context of what's being talked about here. But I like going to Hegel, because Hegel, his entire philosophy, although it was theology, I call it theology, his entire theology was a description of the process of noesis. How do we perceive in a spiritual way? How do we understand truth in a spiritual way? How do we practice the activity of noesis? And so if you go to Block 2, Note 3, I begin with, under Hegel, 4 additional aspects of noesis. And I put in here a very, very precise definition, because we've progressed with this. This is the 3rd time we've looked at noesis, but this is a very precise definition of noesis by Hegel. The process of perceiving the eidos, that's Greek, the eidos ideas and their relation to each other in the realm of absolute spirit. It is the process of perceiving the eidos ideas and their relation to each other in the realm of absolute spirit. We perceive the ideas of the kingdom, then we arrange them in a relational, interrelated whole, and that is Noesis. These eidos ideas are designated as the noemata. These noemata, in their interrelatedness, make up our posited worldview. Why do we shape a worldview? Why do we continually work on shaping up a worldview? Because that's the very best way to renew the mind. It's the very best way to practice what Paul said, be transformed through the renewal of your mind. Now, Ross gave us a worldview that I think is fantastic, and it has the ideas of the kingdom gathered together in an interrelated way to form a circle, and it's a perfect sign model that can be memorized fairly easy, and you can look up the past sermons by Ross, look it up, watch that lesson on worldview over and over and over again. I agree completely with the worldview that Ross presented, and my worldview agrees with it exactly. The difference with my worldview is that I've added a lot of subsystems to mine over the years to give it more detail, but overall it matches up with what Ross has taught us. But mine has a lot of subsystems in it because I've continued to work on it. Year after year after year, I keep revising it and adding to it and making it more detailed and more detailed and more and more and more detailed. And so my sign model, I can write it out, but it's pretty involved. My sign model is best represented by Rudolf Otto, his book The Holy, and I have that lesson on the channel. And if you go to that lesson, Rudolf Otto, O-T-T-O, Rudolf Otto, the idea of the holy, and you watch that lesson, that's my worldview sign model. That's it precisely. And you'll see how intricate it is with a lot of subsystems, but it is a circle. It does match up with what Ross taught. But for one that's easy to diagram and easy to grasp, look up the past sermons that Ross gave us on biblical worldview, and basically you will be practicing what Christ exhorts all of us to do, and that is to take up the activity of noesis. So the eidos ideas are designated as the noemata, and these noemata, in their interrelatedness, they make up our posited worldview. The noematic core of this worldview always and always will be the person of Christ himself. The absolute center of our worldview as believers must be the person of Christ, who is the truth. Truth is a person for those of us who believe. And so the center, the absolute core truth of our worldview must be the person of Christ himself. And now we can look at logic, essence, and spirit. Logic. The divine logos of righteousness includes within it the presence of tribulation. We must add in the subsystem of tribulation and the prefigurement of judgment from AD 70 under essence. The person of Christ abbreviates every one of the eidos ideas of the kingdom. and they will reflect the act of perceiving. Spirit. The noemata, the ideas, can be posited in our art, they can be posited in our religion, they can be posited in our philosophy. For Hegel, it became philosophy, but for me, I did posit the noemata ideas in the art of poetry because I did work as an American poet for 10 years, from 1998 to 2007. But I've also worked in the field of religion with 4 years of theological study at Dallas Baptist University and 4 years of theological study at Texas Christian University. So 8 years of theological study. So art and religion I've been intricately involved with and positing the ideas of the kingdom. And philosophy, I don't have my own, but I have studied the philosophy of Hegel in my graduate and postgraduate work. I've studied everything that Hegel has had to offer. I really appreciate Hegel. He didn't teach at Tübingen Seminary. He attended Tübingen Seminary, but Hegel ended up having the chair. He held the chair of philosophy at Berlin University. Now Moltmann, he ended up being the professor of systematic theology at Tübingen Seminary, and he is the lifetime resident scholar of Tübingen Seminary to this day. He lives in Tübingen, and he is the emeritus resident scholar of Tübingen Seminary to this very day. But Hegel did go there, but Hegel ended up taking and was given the chair of philosophy at Berlin University. But Hegel always said, philosophy is always theology. It's always about God. So even though Hegel is recognized as one of the most important philosophers ever to teach philosophy, I also look at him as one of the superior theologians because he did say that all philosophy is theology. That's going to give us a great look at what Christ exhorts his disciples to take up. He exhorts them to take up Noesis. Let the discerning person understand. And that's from noeo or noesis. So you say, where's the Greek word noesis? It is in Mark 13, verse 14. That's going to wrap up this lesson. We will finish chapter 13 in our next lesson. We will conclude chapter 13.